Got it.
There he is. It's the lesser,
Hello.
it's the lesser spotted Tom Morrison.
Lesser spotted?
Yeah, in your natural habitat on my computer screen.
Ah, yes, I am. How's it going?
Not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, good.
Doing well.
Excited. Yeah, excited to get stuck in.
Had breakfast. Ready to go.
No breakfast, just
Yep.
coffee.
Love it. Love it. So if you're currently watching this, you're not currently watching this because we're not live, but if you're currently watching this and you don't know who Tom Morrison is, you don't know who Jenni Sanders is, they are your mobility gurus basically. They're my go-to resource whenever I don't know something about mobility, about hips, about backs, about knees, and things like that. And I've been following Tom for must be 4 years, kind of since I started, which was 2017. I kind of stumbled upon your stuff, probably to do with like Facebook algorithms, all that, and they presented me with you. And I can say I've learned an awful lot over the last few years following your stuff, and it's great to be able to sit down and chat with you. So you have a Facebook group called the Simplistic Mobility Method, which I'm part of, and there's over 9,000 people in it. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing just seeing every day there's people from all over the world talking about how much this method is helping them get out of the pain cave, live pain-free lives, without surgery, without doing anything crazy. And it's just I've been a part of it actually since before I bought the Simplistic Mobility Method, and it was great to see that. And I think that's a really good tactic in your part by letting people in the kind of behind the curtain to see what progress people are actually making.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like I can stand and shout until I'm blue in the face, but it's quite hard, I find, now where I'm at, because I am pain free and I've been pain free for so long, and I move quite well now. It's great for the other members of the group. If someone comes in and they say, look, I've got this problem, I'm this age, I've this background, they're gonna find one of the other members having the exact same experience that they're going through now, and they're just a tiny bit ahead of them. So it's more relatable that way, rather than me trying to say, oh yeah, you can definitely be fixed, you can definitely be fixed. It's so much better coming from someone that you feel like you're closer to. So
So
that's where the group's really great. Really, like, it's so supportive in the group.
yeah, and there's so many people in it now that it kind of runs itself, doesn't it? I mean, people are kind of they're starting conversations and they're getting interactions, and you don't really have to do too much. I mean, you can chip in whenever they ask you to, but it's kind of runs on its own.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's people that have been there like yourself for so many years that they're answering with our YouTube videos. They're saying this is what Tom would say in this situation. Like, it's
Yeah,
so cool to see, and I go on and I'm just like, thumbs up, yeah, that's exactly what I would give the person as well. So
yeah,
it's so cool to see, the message that you're spreading, and it's, it is rubbing off on people, and people are being encouraging and stuff, because so many people get so disheartened about things, and then if they're around other people that are just for giving up anyway themselves, you just start to believe it yourself, and you're like, nah, I can't be bothered. Then, if they can't do it, I can't do it. Why would anyone be able to do it? So the group's just full of people that have fixed themselves, and they've made themselves feel better with the exact same program, the exact same movements.
yeah,
So there is method in the madness. It's not just a couple of nice stretches that I like. It
yeah.
is extremely well thought out. It's called the simplistic mobility method, because I've taken out all the jargon and anything that's not necessary at all. It's just the stuff that you need that's in order.
Totally. Which leads me on to kind of a first question is what is mobility? Because a lot of people have it in their mind that, and I used to think this, that it's just flexibility. Being able to touch your toes, that might be the limit of what somebody thinks mobility is. How would you sum up the differences between flexibility, mobility, stability?
And mobility, our mission is to separate out what people believe mobility is, and that it's just something that you do as part of your gym work. Mobility should be a non-negotiable thing that everyone should do regardless of how they feel. If they enjoy exercise or not, I don't care. You should be looking after your joints. You should be looking after your hips and your shoulders, so that you don't have neck pain all the time, or chronic back pain all the time, or everyone just sort of chalks it off at a certain point to age. And like, I meet people every week in their 30s that say that they're getting on a bit, and it's just down to bad habits, and it's through not focusing on mobility. So it needs to be separated out. It's like that you do it at home, you do 5 minutes a day, and you work on those main important things, which is essentially what SMM is. And it just makes sure that you have a foundation to be able to push yourself if you want to, or just to be able to cope with daily life, so that if you decide to go with the family for a walk up a mountain, you're not then crippled for 5 days afterwards, so that you have the ability, your joints are strong enough to cope with life, essentially. So that's what mobility needs to become. It's not just, oh, make sure you stretch after your workouts. That's stretching after your workouts. That's not mobility. Mobility is actually looking after yourself and keeping things in check, because so many injuries start happening weeks before they actually happen.
Yeah.
So if you're always looking after your mobility, like, that's the best prehab you can ever do. It's like, oh, here, my neck's starting to feel a bit stiff, and if you catch that 3 weeks before you then haven't been moving your neck properly for 3 weeks, and then you tweak something, you're like, oh, I'm so unlucky. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
the signs were there. They
Yeah.
always were.
Yeah, totally. You hear people saying a lot of the time is, deadlift hurt my back. And maybe it did. Maybe there was, bad technique or whatever, not knowing how to brace, or, too heavy, somebody going for too heavy a load. But quite often, you said there's a huge build up to it. There's something wasn't right to begin with. And it just took one rep and the calf came crashing down. Yeah.
And that's the thing, your deadlift form could be absolutely perfect, but because you weren't moving your hips through all of the ranges of motion that they can move in, it just got overloaded over time. You were just loading one pattern too much. So as long as you're doing just enough to keep your hips happy, then the deadlift is a fantastic exercise. Like, everyone should be doing deadlifts. Of some, you don't have to deadlift heavy, but you should know how to do it. You should know how to activate your hamstrings, and you should know how to brace. So if your hips are moving really well and you're doing that often enough, then you'll be able to deadlift your face off and you'll be fine. It will be a beneficial exercise. But if you're never sitting down in a deep squat, you're never working on your balance, you're never working on your foot strength, for example, as well, then you're just leaving yourself open to these big compound strength movements that everyone says is a functional movement, which, yes, it is, but it's a part of a bigger functional system that of other things that need looked after as well. So there's so many people that just don't rotate their hips. I kind of forget sometimes, even now, that the 90-90 position, which is one of the most popular ones for mobility work, that so many people in the world still aren't doing that. They're just cracking away, they're just doing lunges, they're just doing squats, and they're just doing deadlifts, and they're missing out on that rotational element of the hips, which they need so much.
Totally. The 90-90 one, I took a few days break there over last weekend as well in Port Stewart. And when you're on holidays, you're sitting about more, you're going from one cafe to the next restaurant, blah, blah, blah. I found that 90-90 stretch was so good just to keep everything in order, because hips just tightened up so much. And just spending time in that position is phenomenal. It's so simple in so many ways, but it does wonders. And I've used it with clients. I use it quite regularly with clients who I know maybe have tight hips, or maybe the back has given them issues in the past, and they think it's an incredible one as well. But it's not just about individual exercises. You're more about principles, aren't you? Trying to pardon me, but trying to emphasize principles and learning for yourself how things work, and then trying to apply that to your own body, rather than just taking what somebody says on the internet, do this one that fixes back pain. Figuring out what's going on in your own body, and then trying to use the tools that you and Jenni have developed for us.
Exactly. And that was what I started to what's going on there? That's what I started to notice, was that things need to be done in a certain order. So there was people that was coming to me and they were doing good exercises. They were doing exercises that they should be doing for their hips, for example, but it was the order that they were doing them in that was making the problems even worse. So you'll start to come across like unilateral training, so starting to do single leg exercises to correct imbalances. But bringing it right back to 90-90 again, if your 90-90 is really different on one side compared to the other side, and there's a difference with how your hips are moving. So this is essentially what led to me injuring my back, was that my right hip was so bad compared to my left hip. So I was doing lunges, I was doing everything, but every lunge I was doing, I may as well have been doing sideways squats, because the hips weren't moving properly. So I was compensating every time I was using my right leg, regardless of if I was doing the unilateral exercises. So it was so important to address your hips first through stretches, actually open things up, improve your extension, improve your flexion, improve your rotation first. Then you do the unilateral stuff. That's when that stuff starts to come in, so that you're not compensating when you're doing that exercise. And then that's where you're actually going to get the benefits from it. Same thing when it comes to the shoulders. The amount of people that are doing corrective exercises for their shoulders without opening their upper back up first is just insane. I meet people so often, they've had bits shaved off their shoulders to try and create space in their shoulders because they're getting impingement sensations. And it's like, have you ever done an upper back stretch? And they're like, why? It's my shoulder that's sore. And it's like, because you're not able to move your ribs or your shoulder blades properly. That's why you're getting an impingement. That's the problem. And just through a couple of good breaths and a couple of good stretches, they're then able to do the shoulder exercises better, and they feel totally fine doing them. There's so many people that I've met, like I'm talking within 20 minutes. Like even I feel like I'm exaggerating, but 20 minutes, couple of stretches, they've had shoulder pain for years and it's sorted within a couple of minutes just
Yeah.
through working on the upper back, because the shoulders can then move freely. So then your brain's not going danger and starting to give you all the weird sensations that it can start to give you. So sometimes it's just complete positioning with people. So that's why it's so important with SMM that it is literally do it in this order. Don't skip any exercise. They all build on each other.
Yeah.
So especially if you want to improve how your glutes work, it's really important to open up the front of your hips first. So actually open up so you can extend your hips better. So then you can actually use your glutes to their maximal, and then it'll stop your hip flexors from tightening up all the time. So that's the sort of ideas that SMM's built on. It's like, if I could go back in time and just hand myself this thing and say, do this, be consistent with it, don't slack off, just do it in this order, don't try and get fancy, you'll be fine. And that's what SMM is.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love, yeah, the hip flexor one as well, couch stretch, things like that are really, really good. I find those really beneficial. And again, it's trying to identify, and this was really good about your YouTube channel. I was going to talk about this later on, but your YouTube channel is so good, because say someone puts in lower back pain on one side into YouTube, all sorts of things come up, and there'll be a lot of nonsense. There'll be people, they'll be talking about back stretches and this and that, but they'll not actually identify or help someone identify, is this relevant to them? Whereas if I put in Tom Morrison, lower back, tight one side, I would see all of your kind of lower back videos, but then your videos would take me through in a pretty clever way that would show me, is this relevant to me? No, not that one, this one. And it would help me actually self-identify and go, right, I'm going to try this stretch. And a lot of times it's nothing to do with the lower back, it's the hips, isn't it? And it's trying to work on the hips. Why do you think so many people miss, like, for years I came across videos on YouTube, people just do this stretch, rotate, lie on your back, rotate your legs, clap, crack, pop, all of that. Why do you think there's so many videos out there? Is it just to get hits? But there's so many videos on YouTube are designed just lower back stretches. And for 90% of people, I would imagine, I'm guessing, but 90% of people, it's nothing to do with their lower back. Their back just works flaring up.
Yeah. That's something that, because of temporary relief, if something feels good almost initially, then we're led to believe that it works, and that's I need to do this more often then. But if you say you have instability with your lower back, like your lower back screaming out for stability, so if you can't hold a proper side plank, if you can't balance on one leg, for example, so you're literally telling me you can't hold yourself up and you're basically falling over all the time, that's why your lower back's hurting, because it's just going, you're not able to cope with life. You're falling all over the show. So a lower back stretch there can actually make your problems worse, because your lower back's almost trying to stay tight to protect you, to slow you down, to stop you from doing anything silly so you don't get hurt more. So by constantly stretching it, it's not going to help. It's going to make the problem worse. So that's what we've kind of tried to do with our content, is give people a bit of what they think that they want, and then also throw in the sideways sort of like, but you know what actually could be the problem? Check this as well. And more often than not, what I started to notice with people, even people that were incredibly fit, so I would work a lot with them, like cyclists, and aerobically they're insanely fit, their legs are crazy strong, but anytime I tested them in the SMM movements, they couldn't hold a side plank to save their life, and their upper back mobility was terrible. So that's why they always had such bad back pain, and their hips always felt so bad, because the likes of walking, swimming, cycling, there's not that much joint movement in them. So you can get crazy, crazy good at them, but they're not going to make any difference for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. What about, so the Simplistic Mobility Method, great program. I have it right here, actually, just showing off now. But it's so good. But do you ever get people asking you what's the difference between doing that and doing yoga or doing Pilates? Do people ever think of that, or
Yeah, all the time. And that's essentially what I've done. So there's only so much good stuff to go around. Everything's already invented. It was all being done by a monk a million years ago in a temple somewhere. It's already been done. So I've taken a lot of stuff from martial arts, from Pilates, from yoga. Hang on. And yeah, it was the order that makes the difference. It's the order you do things in. You need to have a combination of both stretching and stability exercises to actually make any difference to how your body feels. So you actually need a lot less than you think you do. Now, by all means, if you enjoy yoga, you enjoy Pilates, do them anyway. You know, it's still a great thing to do. They are fantastic systems to do. But what I always wanted was for the person to say, look, shut up. You need this. This is non-negotiable. Has to be done. That's what SMM essentially is. So yoga and Pilates, they are great. Martial arts are great. Do them all, but you need to focus on the most important things.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's something that I guess I get whenever I recommend the likes of yourself, your videos, your products to people. It's something I'm like, well, I do Pilates or I do yoga, but as you say, it's the order in which they're done, and trying to cut out a lot of the non-essential ones. And again, that's the problem, isn't it, with the internet? You get a million stretches thrown at you, or a million moves to do, or a million different variations, and it's trying to figure out which ones are really essential for optimal hip mobility, ankle mobility, shoulder mobility, and doing them in the right order. Then, I think that's what the simplistic mobility method is really good at doing. It just cuts it all away. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
What I notice with a lot of like mobility programs, like if someone shows me what they've been given as a part of mobility plan, is that it misses out the certain ranges of the hips. So you have, for your hips, you've got flexion, extension, internal rotation, external rotation, and you also have how they can move up and down vertically, so hiking at the sides with the hips too. And you also have then abductor strength and adductor strength. For any coach that's listening to this, always check your clients' adductor strength, because 9 times out of 10 you'll get lucky, and that's going to be the thing they suck at most. So that's where you can fix things. What you'll see with most people is that their abductor strength is totally fine, and that's why clamshells is one of the most commonly recommended exercises to help fix hip pain. But have you ever met someone that struggled to do clamshells? It's like, okay, put a band around your knees and just open your legs and close them, open your legs and close them. They'll maybe, feel a bit of a burn after a few reps, but they can do them straight away. The amount of people that I've met in my life that cannot hold a Copenhagen plank to save their life, which is whenever you're holding up yourself with your adductor muscle rather than the abductors, is absolutely insane. And that leads to back pain, that leads to knee pain. So if your hips aren't complete, so if you haven't addressed all them things well, that's where your lower back and your knees are going to start to absolutely hate you, because you have an incomplete hip. You're just walking around, you're basically shuffling from side to side because everything isn't supported from all sides. So it's so important to keep that in mind. And there's so many exercises, there's thousands of exercises, millions of exercises out there probably. But like I said, or like you said earlier on, SMM is all based on principles. It's like, if I select the best exercises that cover all the principles of how the body works, that's what SMM is. So it's not a few exercises that are nice to put together. It's the best ones for each principle, and that's what it is, and that's why it works so well.
Yeah. The other thing I think it's important to point out is you deal with movements and collections of muscle and how the body all fits together, whereas there's a lot of self-diagnosis videos out there that will be targeting this specific obscure muscle.
It's your psoas. It's definitely your psoas. Everything's your psoas. That's it.
Yeah. And do this one, and this will target it. Nothing else. It'll just get that little muscle. So I think it's really good. Even something like the side plank march, which just it really highlights our weaknesses, doesn't it? Just getting on the side plank and trying to lift your knees up, while staying in a stable position. But it's mad how much that exposes us. We're not used to it.
Yeah, and that's it's good. What the side plank march works there is, it works on your adductor strength, your abductor strength. It fires your obliques. It makes you work your hip flexors. It makes you understand bracing while moving from the hip as well. And it also fires up your lats, and it will improve your posture also, as long as you set up in it right. So if you're in a good straight position, you're going to be working why it's in the program where it is because you've already addressed your sides, you've stretched out your sides, your hips are all stretched out, everything should be sitting aligned. Because if you're someone that's walking around with a hiked up hip, for example, and you start doing core exercises, all you're doing is strengthening your hiked up hip. So it's so important to do the stretches first before an exercise like that comes in. And then it's a total body exercise, which you can make harder again by focusing on bracing harder. So next time you're doing a side plank march, brace as if you were doing a max deadlift, like really over brace, more than you want to, and
Yeah.
you'll find it is so much harder to lift your legs up. You'll
Yeah.
really, really find a big difference there. And then you can work on controlling your breathing as well. So in that one exercise alone, it hits so much stuff. And it's the one that most people will struggle with, especially someone that would be hypermobile. So someone that appears to move perfectly. They have the best flexibility ever, but they're still in just as much pain as someone who's incredibly inflexible. And it's like, what's wrong? You seem to be moving perfectly. And you start testing things like that,
Yeah.
and they will just find it so hard. So that's where you can focus more with them,
Yeah.
on working on those things.
Which is probably a good point to bring in your partner in crime, Jenni. Is
Yeah.
that's something that she would be prone to? Isn't that right?
Yeah, she is fully hypermobile, Jenni is,
Yeah.
and like she struggled to walk at one point. Like her shins would just start to crazy hurt, her ankles would crazy hurt, just because of pure lack of stability. She's totally flat feet, and yeah, she could like whenever I first met her in the gym, it was like she appeared to have the picture perfect squat. She could do the splits, she could achieve anything, but as soon as she started trying to lift weights, she just kept hurting things, just kept getting injured. And it was like, right, what are we going to do here? We're going to break everything down here. So basically, me and Jenni both started to really figure out what works best for hypermobile stuff, and how do you address it in that way, so that you're not just trying to push through and then rest when you get hurt. It's like, no, if we strip things back so far that it's almost too easy for you, and then rep it out, like slowly move, work on balance, and just do really, really relaxed joint movement, but for high reps, and start to build that up. Now she's doing backflips. You know what I mean? That's, from not being able to walk around town for an hour because it would hurt her ankles too much. Now she's doing backflips. So she still has issues now. Like, don't get me wrong, hypermobility, if you've real proper hypermobility, it's an absolute nightmare. And you will just hurt things, but she's able to deal with it. And now whenever she hurts her shoulder or whatever, she's able to jump right into the exercises that are actually in her second program, Stability Builder, and start to work on building it up again. So she knows exactly when her shoulder would like sublux, so it like partially dislocates and goes back in. She knows exactly, she's able to start exercising straight away on it, really, and she's able to get it back, moving well within a couple of weeks, rather than just going, oh no, I better not use my shoulders ever again. It's the worst thing you can ever do. If you keep hurting something, you stop moving it, you just make things a lot worse. Like, skip forward 3 years time, if you haven't moved your shoulder properly for 3 years, that's where frozen shoulder is going to start kicking in. You're not going to be able to move it at all then.
Yeah. Yeah. And hypermobility, is that something people are born with usually, or is it yeah, it's just genetic? Yeah.
There's if you search hypermobility tests, there's like 9 tests or something. If you just search that into Google, you'll be able to see the tests, and you can test yourself. And if you hit all 9 of the tests, I'm pretty sure it's 9. If you're able to do all the movements and that, so it's one of them is just like being able to instantly put your hands flat on the floor with your legs completely straight with like no stretching whatsoever. So it's almost like your flexibility comes from like the joints and the ligaments just being too loose rather than the muscles so much. So that's why, like, you can see people that are crazy flexible, but their muscles feel so tight all the time. And it's because they're able to just throw themselves into any position because their joints just go, okay. And there's no sort of stretch reflex going on there where the brain goes, no, don't do that, that'll snap. It's just not there. So that's why they can really get hurt so easily. And it just takes more time to build things up than it would for someone. I find, just in my experience, is it's easier to get someone from being inflexible to more flexible than it is to build someone up from hypermobile to being able to have a good bit more stability. It just takes that wee bit longer because you have to be more careful at the start. But then, once you've built that foundation, Jenni's like, the stuff Jenni can do now is insane. Like, she's so good at handstands, she's so good at weightlifting, she's so good at calisthenic stuff now. Like, it's absolutely insane. So it's been really cool to see her just develop over the years.
Yeah. For something like a deadlift, would that be a massive problem for someone with hypermobility? So trying to feel your hamstrings getting tight, for instance, would that
Exactly.
be an issue? Yeah.
Trying to create tension in the hamstrings, trying to lift the legs as well. If you're doing a hanging leg lift, trying to engage their core is a very hard thing. They almost find it harder to brace at the start. Not everybody, but a lot of them do. So I just feel bad. I'm sort of those hypermobile
Those guys.
Yeah, those guys. But no, just what I've noticed with working with people with extreme flexibility, for example, is that like bracing, creating tension is something that's much harder for them. It's not that they don't understand it, it's just that it's harder for them to get their body to do it. It's hard for anyone to do it, but for them it seems to be much harder for them, because you can explain it to someone that's not flexible and they'll probably be able to muscle their way through it quite quickly. But for love of trying with someone that's very, very flexible, they're like, I really am trying to brace here. It's just their joints they're just not used to that. So it does take a long time for them to build that up.
Yeah, no, I remember a time I was coaching somebody trying to teach them the deadlift, and I was like, yeah, try and find your hamstrings, feel your hamstrings. Nope, nope, nope. Just it took forever before he kind of got where he needed to be, and on the outside, his position looked fine, but he couldn't feel a thing. So it was trying to
Exactly.
to get in that position, but not feeling it can be an issue. Then not feeling that tension through your body before you try and lift something heavy.
Yeah, because something can look totally right, but if the muscles aren't working in the order it's supposed to be, something's going to break down. And when you start adding more weight to that, that's where the back just starts to round every time the deadlift. And like, oh, I've got stuck at this weight, and it's like, no, it hasn't been right ever. It's just because the weight was lighter, you were getting away with it.
Yeah.
So then whenever you start to add that bit of intensity on, then all the problems just jump right out.
Yeah, totally. I think it's quite good though, like coming from like Jenni's perspective and then your perspective. So you had a bad back injury. How long was it? 2014 or something you said, or how long ago was it since you had your?
It's probably near 7 years now ago.
Yeah,
probably 2015.
Yeah. So you didn't really do much training until you were 24. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you? Was there a reason why you didn't like exercise or didn't bother with it?
I just no interest in it at all. Like, me and all my friends, we just drank and smoked. That's all we did. And then I started watching UFC, and I was like, "Here, I want to win the UFC." So I went and joined the martial arts gym. Never trained a day in my life. Like I went to a gym before, but like you just run around all the cable machines and do 3 sets of 12 of everything, so you're not in the machine too long. And yeah, I started doing martial arts 6 days a week, and I loved it. And I just went overnight, stopped smoking, stopped drinking, and just started training like a crazy person. And I got away with it for a good year, but then things started just being sore and hurting all the time. And I couldn't move on the ground the way the other guys could. I couldn't pull a guard properly. I couldn't sit on my heels. My shoulders were just awful. Couldn't throw a punch to save my life. Still can't. But yeah, all my flexibility started to hinder me all the time. And I was like, right, I'm going to get strong because it was being sore all the time. It was like, right, I need to take strength and conditioning more seriously. So I started training like a bodybuilder essentially, and then started lifting, doing the Olympic lifts, and then eventually moved into CrossFit with no flexibility. It's the worst thing in the world you can do. Because the information back then wasn't the same as accessible as it is now. And there was no amount of resources on the YouTube you could kind of use in the same way you can now. So I was just blindly going, oh well, I've hurt something again. I'll rest till it's better. And then a couple of weeks later, I'd start training again. And then a couple of weeks later, it would hurt again. And then it would hurt myself again. And so it was my shoulder and my knee started first, and my neck. I'd always tweak my neck. And then I really badly hurt my knee. And I started walking with a limp all the time. So I had a bit of meniscus flying around in it. It was just constantly inflamed. So I started having this really bad limp. So that started to combine with my already bad right hip, which had no movement in it whatsoever. So then my back injury when I was back squatting, one day it was 150 kilo for 3, I think. And I just felt a pop, pop, pop in my lower back and thought, oh, I've tweaked my back again for frig's sake, because I used to do it all the time, tore my fascia in my back, and I realigned my pelvis and did all these things. And I was always having back pain. I even remember the first ever, or one of the first holidays me and my wife ever had, we went to Amsterdam, and I was moaning about my hip being sore the entire time. Like, I made the trip miserable because I was just moaning about how sore my hip was because we're having to walk up all these weird stairs all the time. And so the signs were all there, like that my mobility was terrible, and I just wasn't listening. It just wasn't important. I was just like, ha ha ha, I'm inflexible, ha ha ha. Didn't bother me. And then yeah, because I started loving training, and then it just kept getting hurt. And then when I hurt my back, that was when I really had to step back and be like, right, what's wrong with me here? And then luckily, over the course of a year, I was able to improve my hip flexibility and basically do all the SMM exercises. That's when I started to learn more about them and be like, why can't I do this at all? Why can't I do this at all on one side and I can on the other? What's going on here? And then I started, because I was already coaching at the time, I started trying these movements with the clients as well. And I was like, they weren't as bad as me, but they were having those same aches and pains I was a few years back. And I was like, can you do this? And it was like, no. And I was like, okay, there's something in this. And that's essentially how I started to develop the exercises. And then it was a while after that. There's multiple light bulb moments that all led to it. And then it was a while after that, it was like I started seeing people that they were doing the SMM movements, but they were doing it in the wrong order. And then that's when I started to realize, oh, it's the way that you do them.
Yeah.
So that's when I started eventually taking away foam rolling. I was like, well, don't need that. And started taking away others exercise. I'm like, well, don't need that. That's not actually doing anything. That's not fixing anything. I can do that. So it's not the problem. I can't do this. That is the problem. And then so over the course of a year, I made myself pain free, and my lifts all went up. I beat my snatch, I beat my deadlift, I beat my squat, absolutely everything. Felt great, moved better than I ever had. Um, Looked better than I ever did, felt great. And then I finally got my MRI scan, and I went and got I was like, well, I've waited this long, I've waited for a year to get it, so I'm going to get it anyway. And I went and got it. And then when I got the results, it showed that I had an L4, L5 disc protrusion and an L5, S1 disc extrusion with irritation on the nerve. So I can't actually feel my left glute properly. Like I feel when I squeeze it, but I don't feel it move. When I feel my right one, I'm like, yep, there it's going. It's going. I feel totally different to my left. And my left glute has atrophied as well. So it's much smaller than my right glute. And that's from my back injury essentially. But because I do everything that I do, totally pain free, can train like anybody else, and feel great all the time. And anytime I do feel in the slightest bit stiff, I can get rid of it easily without, any kind of fancy techniques or having to rely on anyone as well. So like I paid thousands to physios and chiropractors over the years, and now I don't have to go at all. I know exactly how to look after myself, and I think everyone should want to get to that point.
Yeah, no, definitely. Apart from your one, it was where it was quite obvious that pop, 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 you knew your back was screwed basically. How would you say that we can identify the difference between an injury and pain? Because sometimes if someone gets pain, they immediately think, I'm injured, I'm broken. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's a bit achy, and as you say, it's like a warning sign almost. But if we don't do anything with it, we can make it worse. But is there a time, or is there anything obvious you could advise people to go to the physio or to go to the doctor or get a scan or something? Or can you is there kind of a red light?
Yeah, it really depends on someone's lifetime of training. So if you kind of, you've been doing it for a few years and you kind of know your body a little bit better, then you'll be able to tell the difference between like just a sort of dull ache or a sharp, intense pain. So if you ever get a sharp, intense pain, or there's a movement that immediately it's almost like your brain screams at you when you try to do the movement, then it's probably quite an acute injury. So you should go and see a physio about it and get advice there. Um, if it's something that keeps coming back, so if you've had something that's happened to you 3 times and it gets better and then it comes back and it gets better and it comes back, you really need to look at your overall training and start to assess, what am I not doing here? What have I missed? Because that's most likely what the case is, that you're not doing something in your training. It's not that there's something actually wrong with
Yeah.
the joint. And then it just really depends. If there's an intense nerve pain, for example, like say you did have a disc injury, which many people do, and many people are completely fine, totally pain free, don't even know that they have it. But if you keep running into that issue, and again, it goes away and it comes back and it goes away and it comes back, then really look into your hip flexibility, really look into your hip stability. If you just keep having flare ups of something, then again, it's probably something that you're missing. If it's a fresh injury to your back, fresh injury to your knee or whatever, then you go to the doctor and you have to go through those channels to try and get an MRI scan. But a really good sports physiotherapist that also trains themselves as well. See if make sure that try and find a physiotherapist if you enjoy lifting weights and stuff and pushing yourself. Find a physiotherapist that does the same stuff so that they really, really know how it feels, because a physio like that knows that you're not going to take time off. You're going to say, yep, definitely, yep, I'll rest for 2 weeks and you'll be out running the next day. They know that, so they are able to advise you properly, so that then if they do say, no, you need to rest, then you do need to rest, So it really depends for everyone. I was at a stage that I was doing a CrossFit competition and I did a really, really, really bad snatch, but because the score mattered, I decided to stand up out of it anyway, and really hurt my shoulder and couldn't lift my arm at all again. And I just knew myself, it was like, no, I know I've made it feel weird and aggravated, but I'm gonna do my stuff anyway. So I went into the gym the next day and spent about 2 hours just doing straight arm rotations and stuff from my shoulder. I made it feel totally fine in one day. Whenever, like, if that had happened to me a few years ago, I would have thought, I've broken my shoulder. I need to go to hospital right now, So I'm not advising people to do that, but you can get to know your body a lot better if you work on your mobility and day to day how you feel. So you will change over time. If you feel stiff all the time, if you practice moving as soon as you get up, you're going to get rid of that stiffness faster, and then it's going to become a habit to not be stiff then. So that's where most people are stuck. They're in a habit of being stiff and feeling stiff, and they're not doing anything about it, and that's why it's staying. That's why it's not changing. You need to change how your body feels by practice.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And I think it's important people do take responsibility for themselves. Yes, I suppose sometimes I always equate it to if someone had a car and was always making a funny noise or a grinding sound or something that was vibrating, didn't feel right, you take it to the garage immediately. Kind of funny how we don't do things like the basic maintenance on ourselves.
Yeah.
Aside from taking a car to mechanic and all that, but the equivalent is taking yourself to the physio or the doctor or whatever, but doing the basics yourself, like checking on the tires pumped up, or has it got enough oil in it, doing all the basics. But it's funny how we do often take better care of our cars and we take care of our own bodies and we don't pay attention to the warning signs in ourselves. What about posture? So some people think sitting is the devil. Some people think standing on a production line is the worst thing for your back. You're trying to get out of pain. Is there anything? Do you advise one or the other, or a combination of both, or just doing the mobility exercises? Will that help things significantly?
If you have a good morning habit, and as soon as you get up, you do like 5 minutes of moving a day, and you then have separate mobility sessions that you're actually really focusing on improving things, how your hips move and your balance and everything that I've mentioned before. You can offset those hours of sitting at the desk or hours of standing. So even if you have a really labor intensive job and that you have to lift things with your background and you have to stand hunched over in weird positions, or even think about a plumber, the weird positions they have to get in all day, that's all fine. As long as you're doing the flip side, do good training when you're in good alignment. Make sure you are deadlifting with a neutral spine, so that you've got both sides of the coin. That's where, that's how you're going to have complete training then, so you can get away with the other stuff that you want to do. So if you're not doing good training, you're just expecting to get away with what your job makes you have to do, that's the problem. So it's adding that stuff in, and it's making mobility that non-negotiable. That's the trick. That's the habit. That's the trick. That's the secret sauce. It's like include mobility work, and then you get away with a lot more.
Yeah. And what about when it comes to older people? What is the most? Have you seen like people's posture, like from being like kind of hyphotic and hunched over? Have you seen people like older people? I mean, 70s, 80s. Have you seen them restore to any great degree their posture, or
Yes, we've had a good few people in their 70s starting SMM, and they'll maybe not get fully like opened up again, just like having a perfect kind of posture, but they'll definitely make an improvement.
Yeah.
And who knows, even in the next 5 years, maybe they will. You can always teach your body to move differently, and you can always teach the muscles no matter where you are, starting. It's so cool that we have people like 65 plus, and in their 70s starting SMM.
Yeah.
I think people are starting to realize that they are living a lot longer these days. You don't just get to 50 and go, right now, I just sit in my chair and knit. It doesn't happen. It's like, no, you've got granddads out there in their 90s doing marathons. That's the way things are going, if you want them to. So it's so important to think about that. It's like, if you feel old, it's like, look at your habits. Are you being old? Are you not being active? Are you not, doing this stuff, and that's not a take on old people. Like, I hope I get old. I'm really looking forward to hoping I can get old. So I am never going to lose the habits I have now, and I'm always going to keep checking up on them so that I don't end up not accidentally balancing for 5 years, or not accidentally moving my hips properly for 5 years, and then, oh, I've got all these problems now. Where did they come from? And it was like the 5 years that you didn't do anything, So yeah, you can always make a difference at any age, always.
Yeah, I think it's great advice. Tom, I'm gonna wrap it up soon because I don't want to keep you back, and I think we're running out a bit of time here. But do you have a joke you can share with us? We usually ask guests to share a bad or good joke if you have one.
Oh, it's always going to be a bad joke. So, where does Napoleon keep his armies?
Don't know.
Up his sleeveys.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Love it. Thank you so much for joining me. I would just want to give people a little bit of information about you. So you can follow you and Jenni on Facebook. Just type in Tom Morrison Training. Isn't on Instagram as well? Tom Morrison Training. YouTube as well. Just type in Tom Morrison, and I'm sure you'll pop up.
Yep.
So yeah, and you've got loads of products on your website as well. You've got the beginners bundle, ultimate core, simplistic mobility method, which we've talked a lot about, stability builder, end range training. You also offer video coaching and one-to-one coaching as well online. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's loads of stuff. I don't recommend very many products, but I can highly recommend anything you kind of put out. Definitely simplistic mobility method. That's the main reason I wanted to buy it, because it helped me so much, even just watching your videos. So I wanted to have something. I wanted to buy it myself and be able to back it, knowing that it was good myself. So I'm happy to do that. And yeah, I don't really push products or things, but definitely want to push that. So I do share it with clients a lot. But thank you so much for joining me, Tom. Thank you so much for what you're doing for thousands of people around the world, helping people stay pain free. Yeah, keep in touch and
Yes.
have a good one. Take care.
Yes, thanks so much for having me.
No bar. See you later.
Good talk. Bye.